We are building a model railway. We start from scratch and keep building until our dream model railroad is finished. It looks a lot like Christmas, but that's not snow but plaster. I prepared some things and a lot has changed since the last episode. Our mountain takes shape. Back there, we created a large mountain range. Let me show you this in the other camera. Here you can see the crevices we built. I masked the C-tracks because I didn't want them to be damaged by the plaster that might drip on them. They don't really break, but conductivity decreases. In that case, I would rather replace the track. A little plaster at the side is no problem, but when the electrical contacts are covered with plaster, that's when the fun stops. Just use some painter's tape and mask the tracks completely. I also masked the tunnel portals with painter's tape to protect them from getting dirty as well. It's not that bad for them because you can still model them a little, then sometimes small cracks and folds appear. If you pull that painter's tape off again, the other side is masked as well. Here you can see where I'm working my way. The system is disconnected from the electricity. And I've laid out a few more wires, brown and yellow wires, coming out of the ground, all over the place. This is the power supply for the street lamps. Here you can see a small road landing upwards. I built it from the crafting material that I demonstrated before. Those crafting boards from Hekidur, it is called. I think that's perfect for this job. We can paint later with concrete paint. And we can also apply concrete granules. You can sprinkle it using a salt shaker. That's what this looks like, a small can. You can use it to scatter the little granules. But you have to apply glue on the surface first. I will demonstrate that in one of the next episodes. And I have tried out many different sorts of plaster. It has become very colorful. Let me show you on the other camera. Here we have gray plaster, that's granite rock, from the company Noch that I used here. This brown part here is a rock filler by Heki as well. Here at the front I started to work with a filler from the company Bush. So many different products. That's the modeling compound. The big advantage over normal plaster from the hardware store is that you can work on it for an incredibly long time. You can work on it for about 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes you can work on it for up to 4 hours. Here we have the modeling clay from Bush. Looks similar, but it is a little fluffier. You can have a look at that in a moment. You can work on that for a long time, and the package contains 500 grams. That's something similar called scenery mortar. That's what we saw over there with the rock. The parts that are darker and grayer. That's perfect for that. You can already add paint to the plaster or you can buy colored plaster. That way you can save some time. This, for example, here is an yellowish white or ochre colored plaster. That on the other side is a scenery plaster with a brown color. That looks like soiled already. They usually contain 500 grams or 500 milliliters. That's a regular size. The result is looking very good. Let me show you this with the other camera. Here you can see the different structures. Back there, let me point that out with a brush. I've worked in that wrinkle film. So this area is paper, while these areas are made of different sorts of plaster. And this fella over there, that's a precast rock that I used and worked that in too. They are made out of rigged foam, and the pieces are simply worked in there. So much about the different sorts of plaster. I forgot to show you one thing. This one is from Faller. It is called knifing filler. That works perfectly for modeling roads. Faller also sells a car system, not just for the railroad, but for the cars as well. But this knifing filler can also be used for landscaping purposes. We can use it for the road over there later. Alright, so these are the most important materials we have. And we have reached a point of no return. That's why masking sensitive areas is so important. And especially the masking of the signals is quite some fun. That's why we try a different approach. We will take a screwdriver and let's switch to the other camera so that I can demonstrate it to you. And now I will take them off. You can easily separate them from this base plate. Use a small screwdriver and gently push upwards. After that, you can take off this base plate. You do that on both sides. Actually, one is enough, but I don't know which one of them. After that, you can pull out the signal. Really careful so that you don't break anything. Now we can pull out the signal and bring it to safety. I will repeat that with all the signals and place them in a box. Here, that box contains all my signals. I'll leave them there until everything is finished. I'll do the same with the second signal. I remembered that I have to take off the rear plate. Then I only have to take off one of those plates. So gently take off the base plate. That's also the way to replace a broken signal, since they are rather filigree. They easily break, so if you get stuck to it. That way you don't have to replace the complete electronic, you simply leave the decoder and everything installed and just replace the signal if it breaks. That happens during crafting. Always keep Murphy's Law in mind. Okay, so that's a good way to bring the signals to safety. Now signal is left, I took care of the others already. And I take this one off. And usually, please ask all your questions. Write them down in the commentaries. You can ask everything concerning model railroad building, of course. And we will answer your questions. Alright, all the signals are safe and sound. Next step, we have to use painter's tape everywhere. Same situation as when you were moving. You can continue with something different in the meanwhile. I brought something else from the company Woodland Scenics. They manufacture such boulders. That's an American company and you can buy rock molds from them. Using this, you can model complete rock areas. You can let them dry overnight and then use them the next day. And then you can work them into the landscape. I've planned the same thing for this platform. First, we have this platform here, which was included with the house by Faller. And we have, on the other hand, this finished universal platforms. You can buy these from Auhagen or Noch or from Faller. You can find different ones. As a third option, you may build the platform on your own. Here I have silicone molds. If you have a close look, you can see the profile of the platform edges. Using this, you can build one out of plaster. That's easy with a straight platform. You can also combine it with crafting boards or wood. So you have many different options. You can either use the parts that come with the station, or you buy separate platforms, or you use the molds. That's something that can be prepared now when you start working with the mountains and the tracks. Then you can work that as well. I didn't do that yet. That might be a task for one of the next episodes. What else do we have prepared? Here I have modeling compound from Bush. That's what it looks like. Almost like Fleur with a yellowish touch. We will mix some of that together now. I will disappear shortly. I use a small plaster bucket and pour a little bit of powder into it. I'm doing this here in the background since I don't want to get any powder on the tracks. But I'll be back. We need some of it, about that amount. That's very fluffy. It won't bind with the water at first. I brought bottled water. I don't have a mains water supply in the basement. You might know that problem from crafting on your own. You might not always have running water. We apply a small amount of water and now I use the spatula and mix it. Let me show you. Now stir carefully to prevent dusting. It takes a while until it binds with the water. Alright, here we are, mixing the baby food. Now stir for a couple of moments until it gets the right consistency. It's still very fluid. The advantage of liquid plaster is that it can be applied very easily. It flows down the walls. The disadvantage, on the other hand, is that it becomes very unstable. It easily breaks if you move the system. I recommend waiting for it to set. It takes more time, but the system will be more stable. A friend of mine, a model builder from Munich, gave me a good tip the other day at the store. He always applies primer to the system afterwards. That way, the plaster does not become porous when the humidity rises. That's a good idea. I did not do that here, but that's an option. Those crafting compounds are usually manufactured in a way to fit well. Alright, now we can start to apply that. I can apply the plaster with a spatula, here at the front for example. I apply the plaster directly onto the boards from Bush, which are used as a foundation for the Kibri farm. And now apply thickly everywhere. Nothing can happen there, just apply plaster everywhere. It is still relatively soft, it is almost too fluid. I might add some powder for better results. Let me do that, that way we will get a better result. Always start with the water and then add the powder. That way round it can easily be compensated for. Otherwise you have a problem if your compound is too liquid. Alright, the consistency is much better now, like dough. Just a little bit of water. That's a task that can easily be done by 2 people. A system of that size takes a while to finish. For me alone, maybe a couple of hours. Okay, the consistency is looking very good now. This ochre color suits perfectly to the surface. And I can also paint that later. Now I apply the plaster into this landscaping crap that we laid out in the last episodes when we used the wooden sticks. First, let's model it a little. Later on, we will add some grass fibers to it. We will also add trees and then we will paint the surface with structure paste. This paste will help us model the surface some more. So don't worry if the plaster doesn't cover every corner. But of course, for stability reasons, it is better to have more plaster than have too little. Then you have a sturdier surface and you can move the system around a little bit. I guess you can't travel with it, but that's looking good. And of course, a thick layer of plaster is easier to model. You have about half an hour to work on the plaster before it sets. That's easy to do. It's a very relaxed activity. You take a weekend and you do a little plastering. That's the nice thing about the model railroad hobby. It's not just collecting the model trains and playing with the electronics and soldering iron. It's fun for the whole family. If you enjoy modeling landscapes and working with plaster, this right here is the perfect activity. If you are more into painting, you can paint the mountain, the surface, houses and characters. If you like crafting, the electronic part is right for you. For example, building the ring circuit. There are few hobbies that are as diverse as model railroading. Like this here, you can model and sculpture and play with the materials and shape the surface. This is also nice if you want to get back into this hobby with children. It is not necessary for kids to like the railroad, the trains, or the technical part, but the modeling is a great way for children to get creative. How do you like the embankment? My driveway to the farm? Looks good, don't you think? I'll apply a little bit right here. I'm leaving this wood board free on purpose. I would like to build a small forecourt there for my train station. An alternative would be a small depot, since I have an extra bumper and ramp. I might as well create an industrial area here. The ideas always come to me when I'm doing this. And also mentioned in the last episodes that I'm happier to hear about your proposals in the commentaries. Maybe I will craft it that way, or I will do something different. Now there's a ramp. We will apply plaster there as well and can remodel that. If you wonder what that green spot in the middle is, that is a chicken run. We have chicken that are movable and that are electronically controlled. If I operate a certain address with my mobile station, they will start moving. You don't hear sound, so no crackle, but they are moving around fast. We will work that in and we will use structural paint for that. And what you can see here, my spatula is too small. It leaves ridges, and that doesn't look nice. So I will unpack a larger spatula. But before, I will apply some more around here and work it in. Looking good, maybe a little bit more right here. The first package is empty already, but I used some of it before the show. We didn't use the complete 500 gram. I used maybe 100 gram for the last part. But I organized some more and we can use a different product now. What we just used was material from bush. Now let's use something different and we throw that away. We could use Heki, but that's rather gray. We won't use that now. What we could use from Heki is some color though. That's an arc color. That's what I'll use. One thing that is mentioned more often in the comments. Yes, the filler you can buy from the model shop is more expensive than the 20 kilogram bucket from the hardware store. But you're doing yourself a favor. The material from the model shop can be processed better and it lasts longer. If you are new to the topic and start working with plaster from the hardware store, you have to work extremely fast because it sets very fast. A common mistake is to use plaster designed for electronic purposes. That sets really fast. So plaster that you can use to repair a small hole in the wall is very cheap, but it sets so fast you hardly have any chance to work with it. You're not doing yourself a favor. The color is more ochre. I will stir that now a little bit. Darker, more intense color. That way we don't need to paint that afterwards, at least if you want the farm to have that sort of color. And that's way too soft. It's very liquid, so that doesn't make sense. You can use that as an advantage if you're lazy and you want to save some time. You can just run the paint over it. That way you save a lot of time. And now I can spread the plaster with the spatula. And in this area, that's absolutely okay, because the overall stability is created by the substructured board. But on surfaces with a netting underneath, I would not recommend that procedure, because on those areas we need the plaster to create stability. Here it is okay. I will apply some on top. That way I can create a transition. Let me get the larger spatula. But so far that's looking very good. I apply an extra layer since it is so soft. That way we have this area painted. As I said before, we can use this soft plaster in areas with boards underneath. In these areas, the plaster is very good. I can process it all the way to the house. If you wonder why we need plaster in the first place, the board is level, so we could paint right over it. But working with the plaster is a lot of fun and you can create a much nicer surface structure. Especially at transition points, like with the chicken run. Here we can apply a little bit more. We can attach the netting there. In this area, the soft consistency is an advantage. If the house gets a bit dirty, that's not a big deal. We can attach some foliage to it or work that into the surface of the house. A house is usually not brand new, but a few years old. Next is this road here. We can model that a little bit. Now the soft consistency is useful again. That way we can model the edges of the house as well. Back there as well. We can still reach that very easily. Don't forget the back side of the house. We need some more there. I have to turn around the system so that I can also work the other side. So the spatula is too small. I have to use a larger one. If you have a little bit left, wipe it off at the side. I have a little bit left. I will apply some down here, because up there we are pretty much finished. But first, let me get a larger spatula. Otherwise, this will take way too long. The very large one would be perfect for a road. We can use this one for this spot up here. So let's create a forecourt. We need that area to be level. Now we have a forecourt next to the farm. like this for example. We can work that in later. And now we can move down this ramp. And now this looks like one straight road. And since I'm holding a large spatula right now, I can continue working with it here. And now this is a dangerous area. You cannot see that right now. I will show you in a second. The tracks are not masked here. And if I start to work here too eagerly now, I'll make them dirty with plaster. Or I might ruin the signals. So no matter how much fun this is right now, I will stop here right now. I will move away from the tracks. Over there we need some plaster too. So that's where I will continue working with the plaster. Because the tracks are masked here already. I will have the rest of the tracks masked until the next episode. So useful advice, buy colored plaster. That way you can save some time. And after we are done plastering, we want to start painting. We want to play with the colors and try out which colors fit to the surface. We will use the white areas for that. I will turn the system around until the next episode and maybe I've finished more of the plastering. And we will see what we can do with the paint. In the meanwhile, why don't you organize the rocks mold and another platform edge? That way you can continue crafting with us. See you next time, take care and goodbye.